Hello, good morning. My name is Tivel and I am from GFL Earth. Today we're going to be having a very special conversation with Sarah Zula. And Sarah has been, part of the All Shift Happily Now movement, and we've done some amazing stuff with her. She's absolutely just a light worker to the very core, and we're so excited to be. How's everybody feeling? How are you guys doing? How are the energies for you guys today? Where are you watching from? Hi, Sarah!
Hi. Oh my gosh, Tibet. Hi. How
It's
are
been
you?
too long.
I know. I know. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm excited to be chatting with you again.
Me too. You look so tan. You look so happy. Like I'm.
Oh, thank you, love. Thank you so much.
Of course. How has everything been for you? How are you integrating with all the new energies? How is life?
Oh my gosh, it's been amazing. I mean, there's so much going on. It's like interesting to say, oh, it's been amazing because there's so much going on in the world. There's so much going on this planet. There's so much going
Mhm.
on as we're all shifting in consciousness. And it's fun to be able to have this conversation here because we can just straight up go there. Like we could just talk about this huge shift in consciousness we're all experiencing and all the things that come with it. So I'm doing really well though. I'm here and doing my mission. Like you said, you use the word light worker, so that's like where my focus is, providing people with creating true freedom in their lives. So that's just what the world is about, what my personal version of the world is about.
Yeah. And speaking
Yeah.
of, like, I was just curious, like, because people define light worker as different things. So, like, what does being a light worker mean to you?
Oh, it's a fun question. Yeah, I think it's, I resonate with the words like just like the way of love. Like it's
Mhm.
just reminding us walking one another home, really. Like I always share with the work that I do, because what I do with subconscious work, that can mean a lot of different things as well. But what I'm really doing is supporting people in dissolving the narratives they hold about themselves. So maybe the narratives they learned before they knew better, dissolving the ones that no longer serve them, letting them reveal who they really are, letting them reveal what they came here to do. So for me, hi, I didn't know you were joining us. Hi, good to see you as well.
I decided to join because I want to hear you after such a
Let's
long time.
do it. I know, it's so good to see you. I'm so happy you're here. So I was talking to Devel about the version of a light worker, like what my definition is. And I feel like I was breaking it down like the long version of it just because of the perspective I hold in the world of doing subconscious freedom work. So I would say it's reminding people of the love that they already are and really standing for it, standing for how beautiful this planet can be, standing for how beautiful humans truly are, standing for the magic that can occur on this planet when we are at home in ourselves, when we're no longer functioning from these old paradigms of greed and manipulation and competition and all of those things that really get to fall away. So for me, it's just a representation of love. Just like really being a stand for it. And for me, guiding people home to the light in themselves, to the light all around them, to the love in themselves, to the love all around them. So that's how I think of it. How do you think of it?
I think that's so beautiful. The way and I think that you just defined it so perfectly in its essence, which is really rooted in love, right? And just like acceptance and like self and like how we relate to the world and like how we show up for the world and for people. And I guess when I think of being a light worker, it sort of translates to I explained it to somebody the other day who had no idea what it was, and they were Jewish, and I was like, it's kind of like doing a mitzvah, like just doing good in the world, and like, and there's like 613 mitzvahs in the Jewish religion that you have to complete in your lifetime to be a good person, blah blah blah. But it's not so much like the religious aspect of it, but it's just like the core values of just like being a good person, like rooted in love and like loving thy neighbor and like just like extending that love outside of ourselves and outside of our family just to the collective and like really like anchoring in that self and just pushing all that onto everybody, whether you know whether that there's differences that separate us, whether like political or geographical or anything, or like religiously. So that's just how I see it. It's like no separation. It's just love. It's just being good to the core. And like, does that make sense?
Yeah. It's so beautiful. And it's always helpful, I feel like, to relate it to the person asking the question. And another thing I like about Lightworker, and I'm curious of your opinion as well, but another thing I really enjoy about Lightworker, the fact that you guys have shirts that have it. Like a lot of your shirts say like Lightworker across the front or like Lightworker across the back. I think what it also does for people too is like remind them that they're not alone.
Mm,
Like there are so many others on this planet who have come here with really amazing intentions to support the shift in consciousness we're going through, just to support the evolution of consciousness on the planet, to teach people more about love, to teach people more about their power. So I really feel like having a shirt with that, like you guys have, also like reminds me of the element of the unifying aspect of knowing that people aren't alone,
mm,
because for a long time on the spiritual journey, there's so many communities now, which is amazing. Even now, people feel super alone. But before, like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, it was even more, people really, really felt alone in this. So I think it's so cool to have a shirt of like light worker. I feel like it also brings people together in the awareness that there's so many of us out
Well,
there.
and we believe that on many levels, it works both ways because it's self-activation and activations to
Yeah.
other. So basically, when you wear something that means something, that has a really deep spiritual meaning with the whole way it's designed and the way it is, you kind of like lift yourself up a little bit. You move in a consciousness of being a light worker.
Mhm.
mm,
So automatically it brings you up. And when other people sees that, even though they don't know what it means, it registers.
Yeah.
They might be curious and ask about it. They might just notice it and not say anything.
mm,
And it just stays there in the back of their hand. And then when they will run into that thing again, it will be like, okay, yeah, light worker, I've seen it before. I know what it is, right?
Yeah. It's so
So
awesome.
we're planting seeds. We all are planting seeds. That's what we do,
Yeah.
right?
And it's a
And it's so
beautiful thing to
amazing,
do.
especially in times like that when when you see that there's so much confusion
mm,
and you
Mhm.
see that there's so much chaos
Mhm.
and people don't know how to relate to things, like everything, there's so many mixed messages coming from all different directions. And when
Mhm.
you tune to the mainstream media, it's all about fear mongering, and
Mhm.
it's like, wow. So
Yeah.
people need now those people to rise up and to be an example and to make a difference. And this is our time now.
mm.
It is.
You said something so interesting before that we've seen a lot in our community, which is essentially like the notion or the trope that light workers are born into families or towns or communities that don't understand them, and that they end up being the black sheep, and they sort of live this life of like feeling some sort of like just ostracized from their community or from their family, or they embark on this spiritual awakening and they feel that theme of like loneliness. So as like a coach, like how would you speak, like what is there any advice that you would give to somebody who's maybe living in a community where, or living with the feeling that nobody understands them?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll break it down a little bit because this is definitely something I support people with on a regular basis. And it's real in the spiritual community as well. Like just to get started before I really dive in, It's also very real in the spiritual community as well, because as a light worker, as someone who's awakening to their true sovereign nature, what's going to happen? They're going to look around at the programming they've been given by their family. They're going to look around at the programming they've been given by society. And by the very nature of what they came here to do, which is to be awakened, that causes them to question things. That causes them to be like, do I agree with this? Do I resonate with this? What is my truth? And sometimes that causes people to then feel like alienated from the family, because it's like, wait a minute, I don't subscribe to what everyone else is thinking. I don't agree with living my life in this way. So it is somewhat of a natural process at different stages of awakening to be like, wait a minute, I might not necessarily agree with what everyone around here is saying, which then causes people to feel those things. Now, this is one of the deeper core subconscious limitations. And what I mean by that word are the narratives. Like, we all know the I am statement, right? The power of the I am, the declaration of like, I am is this divine reclamation of our divinity, of knowing like, I am that. Whatever we say after that is what we're declaring ourselves as. Now, the work that I'm doing with subconscious freedom work, and I'm going to bring it back to your question in a second, but the work that I'm doing with subconscious freedom work is dissolving what we put after I am that is limiting us, that is
Mm,
not true, that is a lie in our psyche. So, for example, some people might come here as souls, as infinite beings, with the awareness of like, you know what, I want to go there on earth, and I'm going to do all of these things, and I'm going to experience all of these things, and I'm going to create all of these things. And I want to really refine this part or learn this lesson that I'm never alone, that there's no way not to belong. So what they might then come in and experience is a family where they really don't agree with them, where they really feel like the black sheep in the family. So then what narrative gets activated because of that? I don't belong. Now,
Mm,
the I don't belong narrative, I would say, is a grander one that like most humans share to some degree. I don't know many people who I've worked with who don't have some semblance of that narrative, that just feeling of like I'm different or I don't belong. Now there's a couple reasons for that, because there's also just the passing down of the DNA, of the information in the DNA, where at a certain time, if we didn't belong in a tribe, what would happen? We might die,
mm,
right? So there's a little bit of the old programming just in our system that's like, oh, to survive, I belong. Now, how it can show up in childhood is that as a child, we are reliant on parents or some kind of caregiver. So as that child, if they feel like they don't belong, they might feel like they don't get that love from their parents, which is like life and death to them, right? So what then happens, because we're getting our subconscious programming in those formative years, is then we go about in our adult lives and have that kind of running in the background if we haven't reconciled it, right? So then we'll have all these experiences in our adult lives that trigger that. So it might be the awakening that's like, oh wait, I don't not only not belong with my family, but I don't belong with society.
mm,
And then they'll go into spiritual communities and be like, but I don't belong here either because I don't like any of them. Or like they don't like me. Or like, so like it follows them. It doesn't matter where they go, it will follow them if it's an identity. So the magic that occurs with that is starting to become aware of the lie in it, right? So, how I would guide someone through that is starting to gently become aware of that. First, compassion is so important. It's like no one wants to feel like we don't belong, and it's painful when we're in it. You know, when we feel alone or we feel like those feelings like we don't belong or that we're different, like no one wants to feel that way. And so, compassion is number one, right? Compassion of just being with someone in that feeling, I think is sometimes healing in and of itself. But then the next step is to start to bring that higher awareness. So it's like, okay, where did you learn that you don't belong? Then they'll have some memories pop up. Where did you learn that you're different? When I was in school, the teacher picked on me, they yelled at me, I got in trouble. When I was little, my parent kept saying to me, what's wrong with you? Why can't you be like your sibling? Why can't, right? Like smacking you in the back of the head, like whatever they did, right? That then that being, because they came here with the narrative of wanting to free themselves from it, so then that being activated the idea that they don't belong. So now that they're remembering where it came from, we get to dissolve the lie in the psyche. We get to dissolve the lie by bringing higher awareness. So then I would ask the question of like, well, is it true that just because your parents said what they said in that time, just because your teacher said what they said, it actually meant you didn't belong? It actually meant that that was the truth in the universe. And everyone would be like, well, it felt that way, but no. And then we get to start bringing in those higher perspectives. Well, if it isn't true that you don't belong, then we get to be like, well, then what is the truth? And people's divinity comes out when they realize it's a lie. So people will start saying, well, I'm connected to everything. So there's no way I couldn't belong because I'm a part of the greater awareness for now of humanity. And as a soul, I'm a part of the cosmos. There's no way for me to not belong. So then we start dissolving the lie in the psyche from the root of where it was started, like those formative years. And then people's own divinity comes out and they say things like that. If it's that they're different, what we would do, if it's like instead of I don't belong, it's like I'm different, then we would rewrite the narrative on what that means. Because of course we're all different. So why is it a bad thing to be different, right? So this is how we would start guiding people in these things. You want to get to the source of where it started, and then completely dissolve the identity and connect to reveal their truth and start living from that place.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. So and it's interesting because you know when you break it down, it's like okay, there's the inner child work, there's the trauma, the conditionings here that we need to work with. But not everybody have access to those tools. Not everybody really understands what it is that's blocking them.
Mhm.
And as we know, for different people,
Can you
there's
move your hand a
Yeah,
little bit? Because I think I can't hear you that well. I think you're blocking the
so
better.
for different people, there's different. Is that better?
much better.
Yeah, better. Thank you.
So for different people, there's different uh, ways of of dealing with things and finding their way. Uh, some people will go to plant medicine, psychotherapy, uh, transformational coaching, etc., etc., etc. How would you help people know what would work for them? What's their way? How what will be the best way for them to because sometimes some people will come to you and it will not register, but
Mhm.
something else will work for them. How would you help people navigate through how can I find help? How can I find what's the best way for me to work on myself?
That's a really great question. Usually people who are in my world are because they already resonate, so they're here, and it's super effective when we transform, our identities. So that's the world I've been in. But that's a really great question. And what I would always want to remind people of is like they already know. Like there's already something that they're watching or looking at or like following that's just like bringing a sense of home to their heart or possibility. So I would say lean into the place that inspires you. Lean into the thing that gives you this sense of hope, this sense of possibility, the sense of like, oh, wait, maybe there's something different here. Like maybe something can change. So I would say to just lean into where people are naturally feeling that from whatever direction, because there are so many paths. There are so many paths. There's no
Right.
one way, and it's interesting. So I think that we all know in our hearts what our path is, but sometimes it takes trial and error. Like
Right.
sometimes we want to dip into different things and be like, I want to try this, and now I want to try this, and now want to try this. Or sometimes it just takes like that accumulation of the many different things to find that being's own unique way. Like it takes the embodiment of like, oh, I learned this over here. I learned this from plant medicine. I learned this. And that was definitely my path. I was learning from spiritual teachers. I was learning from scientists. I was learning from ancient wisdom keepers around the world. I was learning from
Right.
sacred sites. And it's like, sometimes it takes just like going a couple different ways. But I think you're touching on something, and Tavel also spoke to it, that's so important, where people do sometimes feel overwhelmed. Like I actually just got a message today. I'm always trying to catch up on my emails when I can, you know, and like really respond to people who are reaching out to me. And I had time to do so for an email today. And this beautiful soul was just so overwhelmed by like, I don't understand how reality actually works. I've been a spiritual student for many years now, and I just feel more lost than ever. Like, how does reality actually work? What's actually happening on the planet? Like, all of these things. And I think that this is such an important topic because there are so many ways. There's so many ways. There's infinite amount of ways that are open and information that's available to us now. Infinite spiritual teachers, so many ways, and they all work. They all work. So then whenever I would say that whenever someone's feeling like overwhelmed, like I don't know where to go, I feel like that's the first sign that they're about to have one of the most profound awakenings within themselves. Because if we don't know where to go, then what do? We get to go within. If we don't know who to trust, then what do? We get to go within. If we don't know what is true, what do? We get to build our discernment. So I think it's important that like if people are feeling like overwhelmed or confused of like what's true, what's actually going on, which direction do I go? Go within. Our heart knows. You
Mm.
know, wield their own discernment. So I feel like that's a powerful
And
point to have.
and would you apply the same logic? Wait, Abba, I'm just so sorry. Can you put yourself on mute?
Really? Okay. I'll mute
It's
myself.
like,
Okay. Okay.
would you apply the same discernment to, you know, how people are navigating everything that's going on in the world, like the energies, like my dad touched a little bit about fear mongering. Would it just be like inner discernment? Or like as light workers, like how do we not absorb like the darkness that's like surrounding us?
Yeah. Oh, these are great questions, man. I love talking to you guys, and I want to know both of your opinions too. So I'm sorry that
Sure.
sometimes I forget to ask back before the next question
No.
because I definitely want to know both of your opinions. But I think that this is a great question. I actually just worked with a client on this because she felt like she was absorbing the negativity. Literally today, she felt like she was absorbing the negativity from her family, and she felt like not only her family but like people in her community that were like gossiping about other people, that were watching the news, and then she was afraid she was absorbing it. So I think that this is real, very real topic, and of course I'm always going down to the root. And what I would remind people of is to start to explore like, well, what is negativity? So like what is actually negative on a higher scale? And a different way we can look at that, and I'm gonna bring it to like a more expanded perspective, then I'm gonna bring it back down to earth, right? So if we look at like ask the question, well, what is negative and positive? And what we could say is like negative is, you know, the horrible things happening on the planet, fear, judgment, all these like ickier things. And then what is love? Well, love would be acceptance, it would be compassion. And if we really ask the question of what's the real difference, like what actually happens when something negative is happening? Well, what do you think in like let's say like Tavel in your life, when something negative has happened, what has it actually brought you to?
It actually is like the inverse. So like the negative happens so that the lesson can be learned and like the love can be felt, or like the self-love, a breakup will happen and then you go on this amazing journey of like self-love and realizing your own boundaries, and it's always like, you know, has a positive outcome as well.
Yeah. So then if the negative always has a positive outcome, then what is negative really?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
So now we start playing in a different conversation because then it's like, wait, then what is negative? It's kind of like if we look at hot water and cold water, they're both water, right? They're both water. They can express in many different forms, but at the end of the day, they're in that unified oneness of being water. So the positive and the negative, they express to varying degrees, but they're the unifying form of love in different suits, in different degrees.
Mm.
So if even the way you answered of like, well, what is negative? It's like a smile came to your face. You're like, well, it's a lesson, so it's love. right? So it's love. So now that we have an awareness of what's really negative, then is there anything to be afraid of if negativity is going on around?
Mm,
Really? So
I
then,
guess.
yeah. So then, if there's nothing to really be afraid of because nothing's really negative, now we're standing in a different level of power where we're no longer going to absorb the information. Because the reason why people absorb the negativity is because they're either afraid that it'll happen to them, so it sticks to them. So they're in the same energy of the negativity because they're afraid of it. They're like, oh no, I hope it doesn't stick to me. So that's why we started the conversation with what is negativity really, to bring the power back and realize, oh, wait, it isn't even necessarily real. So then it's nothing to be afraid of. So if the negativity is nothing to be afraid of, right? Then how would you look at it differently, do you think? If it's nothing to be afraid of, then how would you maybe look at it differently? Or how would someone, do you think, would look at it differently?
I think they would look at it with no fear and just neutrality, like, you
Yeah,
know, just observing and not attaching,
yeah.
if that makes sense.
That's the true freedom. Because then from that place of neutrality, we can be like, and no, thank you, I'm not going to watch the news. And right? So, but it's from a state of neutrality instead of a state of fear, which the fear is what creates attachment, which what people use in the spiritual community is absorbing information. But they're not necessarily absorbing it, it's attaching to them because they're meeting it at the same energy of fear.
Mm,
Makes sense?
yeah.
But then if we're neutral, now we're in our power and we can just be like, and no thank you, like I don't want that energy in my life, right? And I'm not going to play in this conversation. So for example, I was working with my client and she was like, well, what do I do with my family? Like I feel like I'm living in their house and they're talking about all this negativity and blah blah blah. When she was on the other side of really realizing there's nothing to be afraid of, I then asked her the question. I said, so now what do you do with the negativity? She's like, I can just meet it with compassion and I can walk away if I don't want it. It's
Mm,
beautiful, right? Now, there's the other side of things too, however, because
okay.
there's also people who are really here to be like voices, to be activists for certain things. So there's some people who the best thing for them would be to just say no thank you and continue on their mission, continue on their path. But then there's some things happening on the planet that some people are meant to be activists for. So there's some people who aren't going to look at the look at it and be like, "Oh, I'm going to say that this thing on the planet is neutral." They're not going to feel that because that's not their mission. They're going to look at it and say, "I'm here to make a difference in it. So I'm going to speak out about it. I'm going to be vocal about it." Neither one is right, wrong, good, or bad. It's just the constitution of each person as well.
Mm,
But that's what I would, the first answer is what I would say to people who feel like they're maybe absorbing the information. It will create a lot of freedom.
wow. I think I think that is so profound and so well said. Um, and it goes to show that like everybody has their sort of soul mission and like DNA, why what they're here to do. Are they here to like, you know, be activists and like sort of activate the collective and like speak up about certain things, which I feel like, you know, that's a big part of what we're doing here with like GFLs, like standing up, taking a stand and bridging like community and talking about crazy things that may seem a little bit woo woo to people, and then there are people that that's not good for them, and that's okay too, and like having compassion and love and like empathy with like that group of people. Do you agree, Abba? Like, do you, how did you receive it?
That- okay, can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
It's basically what Sarah said is that the negative is the catalyst for our moving forward
Mm,
in life. So every time we look at something negative that happens to us, it actually moves us forward. It moves us forward, which is a great way to look at things and to relate to them. And then you come from a place of okay, this is, it comes to serve me. Everything that is happening is here to serve me. And once you come with this kind of understanding and this kind of relationship to things, the journey is being a little bit more fun. The journey is being a little bit more uh, divinely guided in a way. Uh, the, the the big challenge for me is always, okay, and what we do with all that big negativity that is over there, and how do and it's always that relationship that I have with things that are super and big, and they are like, they're coming for me, right?
Mm.
And that's where it's always like, okay, so what do I do now? So basically, taking your advice and looking at everything as coming to serve me will probably serve me beautiful.
Amazing.
And you're totally right. Every time in life that I faced challenges, it was always to bring me higher. Always, always, always ended up beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's such a blessing. So does that mean that all of our life we're gonna have the negative coming behind us? And that's the duality. That's the duality of life. So there's always going to be negative there. There's always going to be darkness there. There's always going to be those things happening. And this is a big question. Like, is that
Yeah. So
what's going to keep on happening for the rest of my existence?
yeah, it sounds like a tiring existence. That would probably mark for someone to be like, I'm done on earth. I definitely am done here. But it's a very real thing because we do learn, we can learn incredible lessons through negativity. So this is why having the awareness of like, oh, it pushes us forward. It's not so scary. Like that was the point of the conversation, of the awareness that we don't have to be so afraid. And when we see the evidence, like you were saying so beautifully, of like every time it propelled me forward, we can get to the point where we say, I want to learn lessons through joy. I want to learn lessons through grace. I want to learn lessons through inspiration, right? Because we are making it up. And that's the thing that people forget. Of course, we have a collective that we're sharing the collective experience, but we are making up our individual perception or individual experiences. So when people make up a reality, are living in a reality like, oh, I only learn lessons through suffering, that is the best way, then what's going to happen? They're going to keep creating that experience of suffering to learn lessons, right? But if people say, you know what, I can honor the difficulties when they come. I don't have to be afraid of them because I know I'll handle it. I know I'm held. I know I'm always loved here. I know I'm an infinite being beyond anything that can happen in the physical world. The real me is always held. My soul cannot be touched. So then from that energy, it's like, okay, I can handle the things as they happen. I can show up for them. I can handle them. So we're not denying the fact that difficulty can occur. We're not denying the fact that maybe you want to do an energy cleansing or a protective meditation every now and then. We're not denying that. However, what we are saying is how are we choosing to learn lessons? Do we want to actually, like, maybe there's an opportunity for anyone listening to this too to be like, wait a minute. I do want to learn lessons through joy. I do want to learn lessons through inspiration. I do want to learn lessons through fun and gratitude and creativity. So there are so many like different ways that we can be learning lessons. And it's not to say the negativity will always come, but as long as we think it must be dual, it will come. But if we, like, I was going back, I was kind of dissolving the duality in the whole positive negative in that conversation. When we reconcile the duality and realize that it doesn't have to necessarily exist the way we thought it did in such extreme polarities, we start being the walking representation of knowing, wait a minute, is there any good and bad? Wait a minute, were any of those things actually bad? Wait a minute. What is negativity? Doesn't even exist? do I want it to exist in my reality? So this is obviously an advanced conversation, which is why we're having it here. But we get to start making decisions like this, right? We get to start being like, I want to learn lessons through joy. I want to learn lessons through grace. I want to learn lessons through ease. I can handle things as they show up, but I know I'm always held here. There's nothing to be afraid of. So let's go. Let's see what we can create from this beautiful space of neutrality, this beautiful space of excitement, of creativity, of that side of things.
I love what you said, and I love that thing of creating your own reality and learning lessons from joy. But that brings me to a deeper philosophical question about, you know, we're like advocates for light, right? Light worker, this, that. But can there be light with no darkness?
That's a great question.
And
That's a really
right,
good
so
question.
it brings us back to, you know, darkness is the absence of light.
If that's the awareness, right? If that's the thought. But when we go into darkness, we actually see that it's all light. So Tim teaches about this on a regular basis, which actually blew my mind as he opened me up to the awareness of it, because we've had philosophical discussions about this as well, where I was like, well, does duality have to exist? Like, does this actually have to be? So this is really cool. I wish he was in the conversation too. And he said hi, by the way. He said hi to both of you guys before
So,
this.
so wait a
But
second. Does duality really exist? Okay,
that's
let's talk about
the
that.
real question. So what he has brought my awareness to is that darkness isn't the absence of light, it is all the light. So there is no absence of light. So what he's taught a lot of times is that we think that space is dark, but it's not. It's full of light. It's lit up. So from our current vantage point, we see it as a dual nature, but it's not actually the absence of light, it's the inclusion of light, which is pretty a mind-blowing perspective to have on those things. So I think that brings an interesting concept, because then is there any darkness becomes the question. If we choose that perspective, you know, there's so many perspectives, but if we choose that, then that becomes the question, right?
Right, and it is the questions because again, it brings us to our big beginning of our conversation into negative things that happen to us that pushes us forward, or us doing some shadow work. What's shadow work? You know, you go deep inside, you work your shit so you can shine, right? Your light better. So, and you're coming and you're saying, wait a second, there's nothing but light out there, and there is no dark. And it is mind blowing to think about it
Mhm.
because we were always conditioned to believe in the polarities,
Yeah.
because that's the
And
way our universe always worked. And you
yeah,
can look at it, even electricity, positive, negative, right? You know, the polar, it's always there,
yeah,
that polarity.
yeah,
So, and we can come and say, and basically what you come in and saying, you're saying, did you even look at the possibility of everything just being one? So that's the oneness. That is the deeper level of understanding and the deeper
yeah,
level of accepting everything that's happening.
yeah, exactly. Because even the polars are reconciled when they come together. So what does that teach us? That they're not in true essence polar, right? So that's the, like someone commented here, like what if it's all love? And that was the proposition that I suggested, right? We all get to create our own realities. I'm not saying what I'm saying has to be the ultimate truth. We all get to create our own experiences. We all have our own understandings. Now here's the thing. A lot of people are still experiencing this 3D experience of reality, this physical reality, where a lot of humans are under the belief to be afraid of the dark. And there are a very small percentage of beings still who are on this earth plane who don't have the best intentions for people, right? There are things that are happening. So I'm not sitting here saying, oh, pretend that it's all light. I'm sitting here like giving the invitation to start bringing our conscious awareness to the understanding that it doesn't have to be so scary,
Mm.
that it can become neutral, but then we go down into our physical reality and we make that real in our lives. So it's also the awareness of how some people aren't there yet and we're in a shared reality field. So like, am I gonna then go to like some weird, I don't know, I don't want to pass judgment, but like some like dark club that like they're doing like dark things in? Like, am I gonna go hang out there? Like, no, no, because I'm still aware of the fact that we're experiencing shared reality fields with different beings, which is the amazing thing about Earth as well. And we're still in a shifting phase.
Mm.
We're still in a remembering phase. So there is an experience of duality here. But I think the opportunity is now with this perspective, if what if it's all love, how would we then experience the duality in our own lives? How would we then show up to things a bit differently in our own lives? Maybe we would be less afraid. Maybe we would be more like, oh, I'm at this neutral state and I can just say no to these things and I'm good, right? Instead of being like, oh no, I have to protect myself, I have to do all these things, I don't want that stuff to touch me. It's like, wait a minute, I'm a sovereign being. What I say goes, and I say no to that, and I say yes to this from a neutral state. Like, that's powerful, right? So I don't want to say, I don't want this to be taken like I'm saying that there's no expressions of darkness on the planet. It's just like the higher perspective, a grander perspective is realizing it's all one thing. It's all love. We're all held in love. This whole game is held in love, right? So when we remember, like, it's that laugh, it's that smile, right? Like, that's the awareness that happens. It's like, oh, yeah, it's all game, it's all held in love. So now, how do I personally integrate that into my own life? How do I handle my own fears as they come up? How do I handle my own like concern about someone messing up the creations I've made? How do I handle my own concern of someone betraying me? Like things like this are very real. But the more we reconcile these things, find our own higher perspective, the more we're healing it on the entire planet, is
Mm.
the perspective I would hold. And I'm curious what you guys think as well.
Well,
Teva, what?
yeah. So I think that sounds so good and well, but I find myself like also being rooted in like some sort of like identity of like let's say you had a partner that cheats on you and you love them and you're dealing with that betrayal. Like I don't know if I could like remain neutral. And I don't know if that's what you're saying is like, oh, just like have compassion with them, which I guess like we spoke about like the negative always having like a positive outcome, but like the light and the love doesn't mean that like there won't be like that hurt and that pain that we experience like in this lifetime. So and the neutrality aspect was something that I struggled with because I took this 9 month course with Coots where I learned about coaching and I did like a whole intensive thing and everything always came back to neutrality and staying in that neutral, like even when you work with clients and like they're bringing their energy, like how do you remain neutral in self and like rooted in self and like sort of navigate these different situations like grounded. But I feel like the term neutrality like is almost like I don't know that we're supposed to be neutral in this life. I think there's this quote that's like those who are neutral in times of like in hard times are like complicit or something along those lines. So for me it's just like an internal struggle between like okay, like where's my voice? What do I believe in? Like what am I willing to fight for in this lifetime, like in this reincarnation, and like where do I hold the neutrality and where do I hold the love and the light and the compassion for people, for like the collective? Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. It makes so much sense, and it's real. It's a real conversation, and that's why like this conversation is so powerful because of the realness of like, okay, now this is like the real experience of how I perceive that. So one, if we were completely neutral at all times, we wouldn't be human. We would be grays. That would mean that we got rid of our emotions and we got rid of our bodies, like the grays species, right? But what are they doing? They're here talking to us about, you know, maybe that isn't the best option, right? Everyone has their own decision. If someone wants to ascend beyond the body, that's fine. Some people like to be fully human. And that's what it sounds like you're really enjoying, the fact of being fully human. Now, what I'm saying isn't to say that we don't feel what we feel. What I'm saying isn't to say that I don't cry, or I don't get sad, or I don't get afraid, or I don't get the human things that we experience. That's the whole point of being here. Like the taste of chocolate we experience based on the contrast of having something savory before that. Then we have something sweet, and that contrast allows us to have the experience of it all. So it's like the love in a relationship, or maybe the betrayal on one level in a relationship, the hurt that comes from that. Maybe that brings someone home to the awareness that they are always safe, they are always held, no matter what someone else does. Maybe it brings someone to the awareness of knowing, like, oh, I've allowed certain behavior in my life that I am not standing for anymore, and I stand for this, I stand for loyalty, right? So it's not to say that we don't feel what we feel. It's to say that we are grounded behind all of that in the awareness of love through it all. So it's not to say you walk through life never feeling something. It's almost like walking through life with the awareness that you can hold yourself through all of the feelings. You're held in that oneness, in that true essence of love through the ebbs and flows. So it's sort of like what I would describe as like the waves of the ocean on the top are still the same thing as the peaceful bed of ocean on the bottom. But what I'm inviting to come alive in people, if they choose to go down that path, is knowing that they can access that peaceful bed even when there's a storm on top of the ocean, right? They can remember who they are, remember the neutrality of all, while maybe they're crying because it's just something hurt. But like it's almost like the way I would describe it is like, if you think about how you would hold a little kid who's really sad or upset that something happened, runs into the room, what would you do? You would just hold that little kid. So like that's the invitation of what we bring people, like to bring that part alive, that inner safety, that inner peace, that inner love that knows we're always good, we're always held, alive for the fearful part of us, for the part of us that's jealous, for the part of us that's scared, for the part of us that's insecure, for the part of us that doubts, for the part of us that wants to fight for something, right? So it's not to say that we don't experience these human things. It's just like, what is the energy we're experiencing them through? And can we hold ourselves in the awareness of love through them? So that would be like one portion of what I would bring in to just talk about the realness of emotions, and knowing that if we're going to be fully human, it means being connected and alive with our emotions, but also not judging them. Not judging them as bad, not going into the catastrophizing, which is what a lot of people do. They go into severe anxiety, severe hardening up, severe all of these things because they're not accessing that peaceful center. They're not accessing that awareness of love, or that awareness that they're held here, that awareness of the game of it all, right? And also, like, Tavel, if you feel like you have something you want to stand for and like use your voice for, that's the representation of what I was saying before. Like some people are here to do that. Some people are here to do that, and that's amazing. So like if you want to stand in your freaking power as a feminine force and use your voice for something that you believe in, like amazing, go for it. You know, like that's freaking awesome. And perhaps if you were too neutral, see, that's the thing about neutrality. It doesn't mean resigned. And a lot of people make it mean that too. I know I'm giving very long answers on a lot of
No,
things, but you're asking amazing
that is
questions.
so,
So
I mean,
yeah, so
please continue.
what a lot of people make it mean is like, whatever, I don't care, it's all good, but that's not living. So it's like, but what matters to you? What do you care about? Like, go speak for it, go create it, go live. You know what I mean? So neutrality doesn't mean resigned. It means that connection to that peaceful bed through all the ebbs and flows, through the humanness, through the disappointment, through the insecurity, through all the things, through wanting to go use your voice for something and be like, I'm speaking out on this, this matters, I'm doing this, right? So that's what I would say and clean up around the idea of neutrality.
I love
What do
I
you
love
guys'
that.
perspective on it?
For me, I think you were so right on when you said neutrality doesn't mean like resignation. And I think that those two just like became synonymous for me in like my definition of neutrality. So that really hit home for me. And thank you. Thank you. You just gave me so many like little seedlings and like truth bombs and like
Awesome. Thank you guys as well. These conversations are awesome. These are fun conversations to have. Yeah.
Abba, what did you feel?
Life, first of all, it's a life coaching session right here with with Sarah, which is which
Thank
is
you.
great. You're amazing.
So,
uh, you know, and it just what I was thinking about, what came up to my mind while you were speaking and talking about neutrality and talking about finding your place, the word effortlessly came to my head. Is
Mm,
how do we create, because sometimes we do want to be out there like Tavelli saying, and I want to, but it takes, how do we do those things and we keep on moving forward personally and pushing the people around us, but do it from a place of effortlessly. So we just move forward and things just happen. And we don't need to invest all of us and really like, "Rah," just like it's just happening because it's happening. And that word for me sums, everything that you said, or it just came up to my mind, is to find a way to do that without the effort of trying to do that, to find that place in you that just helps you go through the storms and the good things and the parties and beautiful life, and you just navigate through it.
that's
somebody
beautifully
said
said.
riding the wave.
Yeah, Linda said here, riding the wave, and it sounds like even like as you were describing it, you were in the energy of it. It was so beautiful. Like you were really transmitting the energy of that. And this is the beautiful thing too, because it's so interesting because we're talking about effort and as a business owner, as someone who's very committed to my mission, as someone who's, I effort in life. Right? I effort. I work hard. I like the hustling energy. Like I like it, but but what I noticed, even I'll be personal on it instead of like coach mode or teacher mode or whatever the case. Like the personal difference I felt the most in a beautiful way, especially from someone who's like grew up near New York City of like hustle, like let's go. I was an athlete, so it's always like let's go, let's go, let's go. So I think the most beautiful shift that I felt in myself is like, well, what's pulling me? Is it pulling me because I'm fighting the bad and what's wrong and I'm like trying to survive? Or is it pulling me because I'm so committed to be of service to love? I'm so committed to the beautiful world that I know is possible. So I think also like what's helped me is like knowing what's pulling me, knowing what's like pulling me to commit, to connect. And there's that energy of like in Taoism, of connecting to the flow and the way of like the art of non-doing, right? Doing with the art of non-doing. And I really think it sits in that center of even what you were talking about of effortlessness, but connecting to that energy and being moved by it.
Mm,
Like not as much trying, not as much fighting, not as much being afraid, but when we're pulled by something so much greater than us, when we're connected to like the higher outcome of like, why am I really doing this? Well, I'm doing this because I believe in a more beautiful world we all know is possible. I'm doing this because I believe that human beings are meant to be sovereign and free and living incredible lives on this planet. I'm doing this because I want to end suffering on the planet. I'm doing this because of all of these things. Now it's like, okay, how can I show up and just be in alignment with that?
Right, right.
Right?
Uh, but uh, that brings me. You were talking about how much effort you put, and I was talking about the effortless. And
Yeah.
obviously, I say that because my conditioning as well. I grew up and I was conditioned all my life. My father always told me, "You gotta work hard, and you gotta work hard, and you gotta do this to be successful. You gotta work hard." And it's engraved in me that I always have to work hard. And for me, that place of effortless, that's like where, wow, that my soul is yearning to it. And I
Yeah.
love what you said, what you're drawn to, because what you're drawn to and what pulls you, right? Because it's like a magnetic thing. Like if you really go towards what pulls you, you don't need to do anything because it just pulls you.
Yeah.
So then it
Yeah.
becomes effortless.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so fun. And I think that it's like it's a beautiful thing too to be in that flow and to connect to it. But I know that for me it took time to like even reframe what I thought work was. It's like I had a while where I was like, working in corporate environments and like 9 to 5 and like let's go. I was in sales environments. And then like I just went and started my own business and took that energy and put it there. And I was like, wait, why am I creating a business like this? This sucks. Like, I'm exhausted. This is not it. So I know that even like connecting with that energy is beautiful, but it took me like reprogramming the idea of like, what do I think work is? And like learning in the micro moments to bring play and bring the energy of like joy into things like finance meetings, into things like the mundane stuff. And like the more I did that, the more I'm like, oh, like that feeling when you're a little kid and you go to bed because you were like playing all day and you're just like exhausted. It's like the more I brought that into every little piece of my work, the more work became play. And it's just like, oh, okay, let's do this. Let's go. What are we going to play with today? Let's go. So I think that energy creates freedom, but also for me personally, it took time of like reprogramming the way I relate to like tasks too.
Mm,
I'm
that was
curious how it went for you guys. I mean, we just took a totally different direction talking about work, but it's okay.
Abad. You wanna? You're on mute.
I've so many uh, mixed feelings and mixed ways of still doing work. I still feel that a lot of my conditionings are playing a big role in the way I work, and those are for me my the things that I still need looking at. I'm looking at it all the time,
Yeah.
and it's like where is my conditionings are playing a role in the way I work, the way I do, and I build things the way I do, and uh, it's like a work in progress all the time. At least for me,
Me
it's
too.
like yes,
Yeah.
you feel that you're still working it, or it's like okay, you made those decisions and you switched, and that's it.
No,
You're okay with
it's always new. I'm always refining, like always refining, Something that felt like play a week ago might not feel like play this week because there might be a few things going wrong or a few things not as I expect. So I feel like that's the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship and about business is that it like is a reflection of what's going on within us, and like it allows us to just like look at this conditioning on a regular basis if we're being real, and if we're like committed to, like you said, even noticing it, like committed to making a dream come true, committed to making it freaking amazing. Then it's like we notice all the areas it's not amazing and we keep refining. That's my experience. I say we because that's what I've experienced and what I do. I feel like it's a constant refinement.
definitely, definitely, and I feel like us, the way we doing it right now. We're talking about GFL, Galactic Federation of Light, our brand. In the first, the way I we started building it is the way I knew how to build a company and how to do everything in the way building a company. And the more we do it together with obviously Tevel and Shani, we just finding different ways, and but the great thing about it is that pool that you were talking about, like it, we know that's our calling.
Mhm.
We do something that we care about so much, so we're not so rigid in the way we think about it. We just let it happen in every way that is coming to us, and things are pulling us in different directions, and it's wonderful. We
That's
just
amazing.
the experience of the change there for us, it's so big. So
I
yes.
commend you. Like, I commend you so much for building something as your business and allowing it to shift, allowing Tavel to bring in her magic and like shift it, allowing, I think your other daughter's involved in it to bring in her magic and shift it. Like, I commend you so much for that because that's magic. Like, that's incredible that you guys are doing this. And I feel like that's like goes back to the beginning of our conversation of like, well, what's the unifying force? If we all remember the unifying force, then any conflict, any duality, any different direction always comes back to center because that's the greater picture. Right? This is why in the 3D world, businesses have mission statements because they knew how it worked. Like, if everyone's aligned with the mission statement, then no matter what happens, it'll bring us back to center. So if like you guys are like being pulled by this thing of like we are here for a mission, let's do it, then that always brings it back to center because it dissolves the idea of duality. It dissolves the idea that things could be this way or that way or right and wrong or good and bad. It's like no, it's actually all this. So I think it's cool that you ended there because I feel like you guys are the representation of how that grander concept we talked about before of like neutrality and having one force, like a unifying force, how it can show up in business and make it beautiful. So it's amazing that you're doing that.
Yeah. Oh, well, we're proud. Here, look what I'm wearing today. It's team shirt, right?
Oh,
Look,
she's traveling now.
all shifts happening now. Yeah, so it just happened that
I'm
I
sharing my
picked up
mom.
today. Uh, Sarah, it's always such a pleasure. It's always such a
Seriously.
pleasure. We can talk for hours and dive deep,
I know.
but you're amazing. Thank you so much for sharing and for being who you are. And uh, you know, I know the work you do on this realm, in this realm, and on this planet is huge because you got amazing insights and a beautiful way of bringing it and conveying it and talking about it, and way
Thank
to
you
go, girl.
guys.
Way to go.
Thank thank
You're
you
really
both so
lovely.
much. Thank
We
you. It
really
means a
love
lot
you
to
here.
me.
We vouch for you here at GFL. We really love
I
her.
love you guys too. I love you guys too. And I loved hearing a bit, like if we had more time, I'd want to hear more about how things go in the business and how you guys do all of that. Just so cool that you guys are doing this. I love you guys so much. And are you guys going to come to the All Shift Happily Now conference?
We
And
actually,
we thinking about it. Yeah, we're thinking about it. We have some things to do in Europe right before. So we got to be in Europe in September, and I got to be there again in July. There's a lot of things happening. So, but things might shift. I know
Well,
that things are
I
shifting,
may
happening,
be
right?
putting out there.
So
I may be
we're
putting
gonna
out there that you guys
we,
come to the conference because it's going to be amazing. It's going to be
exactly.
freaking
So
incredible. And I
I
would
would
love to
love to
see you
do.
guys there.
I would love to do another live with you guys where we talk about all the other things that we just said we're going to talk about, and that's going to be fun to talk about things, and you're going to coach us through it live.
Let's do it. Let's do it, baby. I'm in.
Daryl,
Awesome.
thank you so, so much for your time and just your wisdom and like everything that you do with your heart, and we all feel it. And it's just like a warm hug. And I just want to thank you just for showing up in this reality as who you are and being who you are to all of us. It's such a gift. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. No, it's mutual. I adore you both. You're amazing beings. I'm so happy we've crossed paths. Awesome. Beautiful. And thank you, everyone, for
Thank
Thank
listening.
you guys
you,
so
everyone.
much. Have a
Bye.
Bye.
beautiful day.
Bye for
Bye.
now.